In Our Expert Opinion podcast is brought to you by SVN Saunders, Ralston, Dantzler Real Estate, a full-service land and commercial brokerage with almost $4 billion in transactions since 1996.
Okay, we're ready to go.
Cool.
But before we do that, I actually have to introduce two people who are probably, other than us, the most two important people in the room. They're the only other people in the room. But that would be Michael, I call him Michael Huntley. He is our, Michael, I'm sorry, I don't even know what you do here.
Actually, his name is Michael Shane, but he's counting.
Michael Shane. He's just around. I think he's just here to help out in whichever way he can. And then I called him my emotional support animal, but he's like a little bit more aggressive than an emotional support animal, and that would be Chad Mills, who, you know.
Oh, no Mike.
No Mike,
and,
Mike.
Short leash Chad back here.
And Chad Mills.
Apparently I'm aggressive.
No, it was just, we recorded a couple of days ago, and as soon as we were done recording, Chad just goes, no. We had to start all over again. So, but I like him in the room, and I like Michael Shane in the room as well.
So he's your version of Better Call Chad?
Yeah, Better Call Chad. They both make the pod happen, and hopefully they'll provide some laughter as well. They usually do.
I've got a button for that somewhere.
You do have. We can have like a pre-recorded. Like, if you have a joke that you want to tell, let us know, and we'll make sure that people think it's funny.
That's good. That's good.
We can fake it.
So that would even work for dad jokes, right?
No, we're not going to do that here. No, I'm kidding, Richard.
In our expert opinion.
I got you. Okay,
Please.
all right.
I don't even know if I said that. In our expert opinion, the podcast right now, I am joined by real estate agent Richard Dempsey, who maybe one day would become a broker if he decided to.
Affectionately referred to as the king.
By some, not by, no. I think we actually need to get a plaque for your door that says Richard the King Dempsey. So it just people know when they're walking in. You don't have to tell them.
No, it would satisfy the narcissist in me.
And then it wouldn't be so like self-imposed, because people would just think, oh, that's what other people call Richard the King. Mm-hmm. So, and not to be confused with, I guess, Richard Petty. Is that where you got that from? I think people
The
might have called
king?
him
No.
King.
Jimmy, our friend Jimmy, is the one who assigned that name to me.
Okay, I did not know Jimmy.
But my name has a long history in being king.
Is that right?
Yeah.
King Richard.
Yeah.
Is that where you're going with that?
Yeah, that's where I was going with that.
Okay,
All right.
got it.
I guess so. So do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do here at SVN, SRD, kind of your day-to-day?
Sure. Well, how far back do you want me to start?
Let's start at the beginning. Picture it. 19...
Something. Yes.
10.
Yeah, whatever. February 1st, 19...
Oh, I didn't know that you were a February baby.
February 1st.
Me too.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So most presidents were born in February. So we missed our calling, or we have something to shoot for.
I think we both still have a chance, yeah.
Maybe so. Okay, back to me,
Yes.
where we should be.
Yes.
Yes, I was born in Lakeland, Florida. You may have heard of it.
I thought you were born in Kathleen.
Well, I grew up in Kathleen.
Okay.
And I went to Kathleen High School.
Okay.
Actually, I lived not far from where Chad lives. I mean, literally. I used to walk home past his house every day when I was in
I
school.
don't know how to tell you this, but I don't think that Chad was around at that time. I think...
His house certainly was.
Okay.
My grandma's house.
Well, even the one you're in now was there.
Oh, yeah? Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So, anyway. So, yes. So, Lakeland, and in 1980, I married my high school sweetheart, and we've been together this coming week 42 years.
That is Incredible.
And this month also, I have completed my 22nd year with the broker Dean Saunders.
That's also incredible. The fact that both of those relationships would stay intact, I think really speaks volumes to your character. So congrats.
Thank you.
That is, both of those are, I think, major milestones. So I hope that you will celebrate appropriately for both.
Absolutely.
Maybe they should throw you an office party. Because you're like the longest, been around the longest, right?
Yep, it's true.
So before you were an agent, what were you doing?
I was a staff appraiser, state certified general staff appraiser for an agricultural lender. And after 13 years, they decided they did not need a staff any longer. And the first Monday after Thanksgiving, they called the entire staff in and said, hey, you guys go do something different. And which was a shock to all of us. But it turned out to be a very good thing, because then Dean and I both had independent friends who knew us and recommended to us each that we should talk.
Oh, I didn't realize that you guys were not already pals, because there is a picture in this office, and it is of you and Dean, and I think you are looking at...
It's on the wall right behind me.
Yes.
Yep.
You're looking at maps or something, or...
Yep.
And so that is after you started working with him. That's not when you were doing appraisal work.
Well, that was in 2001.
Okay.
I started with Dean in 2000.
Okay.
And so, yeah, that was an interview the Ledger did. But yeah, so it was very cool how we were put together. It was providential, some people would say.
Divine, truly.
Yeah, right.
And so then, I mean, you've been around for the building up of the business and I guess merging of businesses, because SRD does both, land and commercial transactions. And so you are on the land side. And, I don't even know, did you go to college?
I went to a certain community college here, but that was...
Because, I guess growing up, did you think that you wanted to go like a land route? Because, obviously if you're doing appraisals and everything, that has to do with land. So did you always know that you were interested in real estate and that was like maybe the route that you were going to take?
No, I really didn't. I started out when we were married, I worked for a company called Lender Machinery, which is now over in Plant City.
When you said when we were married, it almost makes it sound like you're no longer married.
Please don't tell my wife. No.
When you were first married?
When I was...
Okay.
Yeah, to my first wife.
I am. She's going to be your only wife because she might end you after she hears that comment.
It's true. I worked for Lender Machinery for a few years. Then I worked for the city of Lakeland for 4 years as a meter reader. Plenty of stories there. Then I worked for the...
the electrical meters?
Yeah, I would read electric and water meters.
Were you ever chased by a dog?
I was actually walking down the street one day, reading a water meter on the south side of town.
Okay.
And there was a dog that always had to be put up. We had to call him every morning before we would go out there. This dog broke the door down.
He hated you that much.
And charged me and wound up biting me.
Ooh, yeah. Where?
On the leg.
Okay.
So, yeah, that was pretty freaky. But I've got plenty of other stories that way, but we won't go there.
Okay.
But then I had a friend call me and say, hey, I work at the property appraiser's office and we need guys. You ought to come. So I did, and I was there for 4 years. And then I had another friend call and say, hey, I work for this agricultural lender and we need appraisers. You want to come do this? And I said, well, sure, let's talk. And so then 13 years later, they said, this is not working out so much.
We're not friends anymore. I don't have any friends like that. None of my friends have ever been like, yeah, we'd like to pay you to do this job. So I guess I do new friends, but we'll see where that goes. Interesting. So, you just kind of fell into it, I guess. And I guess it was the right thing because you have done very well for yourself here.
Well, thank you. Rather than felling into it,
Felling.
rather than falling into it, I would prefer that would be something like providentially, you know.
Yeah, you really like to think that things are.
I know my steps are ordered, and so that's in spite of myself, I wound up in a good place.
Yeah. Okay, so then you've worked on. I think we were talking earlier, and you were saying that your first. I don't know if it was your first transaction or your first like large transaction.
Mm-hmm. First large transaction.
Transaction.
Right.
It was 1,200 acres,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't remember the county it was in.
Indian River County.
Indian River County.
Mm-hmm.
And what was that?
It was a large pasture tract been used for cows, backed up to the Fellsmere Marsh, and the owner was looking for a site to develop a place to go duck hunting, and this was well suited to that. And we showed it to him, and he pretty much offered full price.
Are you able to tell us who the buyer was?
I don't know why not. It would be public record, but it was the former owner of the New England Patriots.
So, I think whenever I hear of these, like, obviously large parcel transactions, I'm like, who could afford that? I always ask that, if Dean or you or whoever sells 125 million acre property, what are people doing? Like, how do they afford that? And then, you hear that somebody was a football team franchise owner, and it's
right.
like, oh, that's how they don't care. It's disposable money.
One of the one of the things I have learned in this business that's a bit surprising to me is how much cash there is out there. There are people, the largest transaction to date that I've been a part of was a cash deal. It was the shortest closing I've ever been involved with. We went in and this lawyer's office in Palm Beach, and the seller signed one document, and that was it. We were done. And I happily accepted my commission check, because back then we still used paper for things. And my wife and I drove back here and got my commission check, and it was spectacular. But most of my I would say probably 80% of my transactions are cash. Very few are financed.
I don't know what kind of prayers or like dances you're doing at night, but I need to do the same. Most of my transactions, because I was doing leasing almost exclusively, have been brutal, to say the least. And it's always the smallest deals. I said this with Lauren Smith the other day, but it's like always the smallest deals that seem to go the worst, and they just linger on. And I will lay awake at night, just like, please, please, please let this lease close, please. So it sounds like you have not had those experiences, and I'm very happy for you.
No, that experience is universal. It doesn't matter whether it's residential or commercial or land. The smallest deals are the ones that are the biggest pain. It is true. They are absolutely true.
I don't know. I don't know why that is. I have a couple of theories that I probably won't tell on while I'm being recorded, because I'd like to keep working with people. But I always enjoy hearing about, other experienced brokers and agents, like the experiences that they've had. Because obviously, I walked into this brokerage. There were so many people that have been established and experienced for a lot longer than I have been. And so it's, you see somebody like yourself or Dean or Gary and Todd, and it's like, why am I not doing that? But then, you hear the stories about just them being, I don't know, people pulling guns on people and just wild experiences selling land. So actually, we were talking earlier about kind of like a cool experience that you had with a potential buyer on another 1,200 acre property. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. it's one of my more memorable experiences in my career. But this 1,200 acre parcel had a very large house on it, and Dean actually had set up the showing. It was my listing, but he couldn't be there. But so I showed the property to him, and this guy shows up, and actually it was 3 guys, and 2 of them were members of the Detroit Tigers. One was a pitcher, and one was may or may not have won the Grand Slam in baseball.
Okay.
Which hadn't been done in 41 years before that.
And so for, I guess, people who don't live in Lakeland, or people that do live in Lakeland, the Detroit Tigers have a contract with Lakeland,
Right.
where they do their spring training here. They have a couple of, they don't have any games here.
Oh yeah, they have a full preseason slate.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so they're kind of a big deal here.
Well, Lakeland's the longest serving site for Major League Baseball.
Yes.
Continuing relationship, and so
Yeah.
they've been here, I think, 52 years now, something like that, maybe longer. I don't remember.
Yeah.
It's a very long time.
Yeah.
But yeah, they are here, and it was cool growing up here because you'd go to the Lakeland Mall, which back then was a shadow of anything else, but you'd see baseball players all the time. Bill Freehand was a catcher with the Tigers. Saw him at Specs Music, and Aurelio Rodriguez, a third baseman, and all kind of guys would be. You just see him around town. And my dad would go to breakfast with Sparky Anderson every morning.
I wonder, because I don't know anybody.
Yeah.
And so I wonder how many people I've passed that have potentially been famous or,
Right.
well known that I literally wouldn't know.
Yeah,
So I
Lakeland-
guess that's why you got to be nice to everybody, and I need
Maybe
to
so, right.
take a dose of my own medicine in that. Anyways, so you go on this showing that Dean
Right.
sets up.
And they show up. I did not know who to expect, but
Okay.
the first guy that showed up was a guy that lived in Auburndale, and he showed up in an old white Ford pickup truck, and I'm thinking, oh great, this is somebody that doesn't have the funds to do it. Then I found out he was
Michael is super offended right now. Michael is from the Dale, and he is
Yeah.
not happy with you. He might cut this episode short.
maybe so, but
Richard's like, he ain't got a mic, so we're good. I can't see anything. He's still there. Hey!
all right. So he shows up, and at the time I didn't know he was a Tiger pitcher. And it was maybe your first or second season with the Tigers.
Okay.
But anyway, great guy. I wound up selling other properties for them in the following years. But he was there, and he was with this other player, Major League Baseball player, first base, home run hitter like crazy,
Okay.
and his cousin.
Okay.
And
So there's 3 of them in total.
right.
Okay.
And so they primarily wanted to see the house first, so we went in and explored this very large house, and just beautiful place. And then I asked them if they wanted to see the rest of the ranch, and they said sure. So I said, well, let's go jump in my truck. At the time I had a Chevy Silverado crew cab, and I expected them to get in the truck with me. But as we get to my truck, the player said, hey, can we ride in the back of your truck? I'm like, okay, sure. Nobody had ever done that before. So I thought.
Well, I feel like that's an Auburndale person for you.
No. This was the other
Oh,
one.
no way.
Yeah.
Okay.
So-
Sorry, Michael.
Right.
Michael.
So they jump in my truck, and of course I was still awestruck because
Sure.
it's not often you meet an absolute certifiable Hall of Famer.
Was your truck clean?
I keep it spotless.
Okay.
I mean,
Man, I don't know. I mean,
yeah.
I
No.
typically don't, so I'm nervous.
Yeah, I'm a bit.
Okay. Okay. OCD with that kind of stuff. Got
That
it.
was the phrase I was looking for. So they jump in the back of my truck, and one of my very best friends at the time was the principal of Auburndale High School. So we get in, and we're driving around the pasture, And I said, "You will not believe who is in my truck with me." And I told him who it was, and he goes, "Oh man, that guy is great. He's just a first class kid." And we're talking. All of a sudden, it strikes me, holy cow! What if I drive up on a bull hole? And bull hole's a hole that's made when bulls they scratch their backs or whatever. They pretty big holes, and it's easy to drive up on them and not see them, and your truck fall in them into the front of them or whatever. I thought, oh man, what if I drive into a bull hole and I throw all three of them out of the back of my truck, and one of them breaks their arms, and I become the most hated man in baseball. I mean, it didn't even occur to me that I was at that point would have been a personal injury lawsuit waiting to happen, but. Anyway, so I hung up from him and then paid attention where I was driving, and we got out and took pictures, and it was spectacular. He didn't wind up buying that one, but it certainly was a highlight for me because he was very, very nice and surprisingly not as humongous as I would think. Actually, his cousin was even more. I mean, he was like he'd be the one that you would expect to be the one that would be the home run, champion, but.
I always, I grew up in a really small town with like cows, chickens, horses, whatever, animals. But I feel like most people, it still makes me laugh when I hear these stories from you guys about like a bull.
A bull hole?
Yes.
There may be a more technical name for it than that, but it's...
I can't. It just really cracks me up, and I
suppose I could call it a bull divot.
I don't know anymore, but
right.
I always, whenever I'm talking to people and they're like telling me these stories or they mention something like that, and I just sit there and I'm like, okay. I act like it's totally normal, but I think that... I went to law school down in Fort Lauderdale. If I were to say that to one of my classmates, I think they would be like, what are you actually talking about?
Right.
So I really do try to keep those stories to myself, but I'm glad that you guys are here to tell them because they need to be told.
Yeah.
I think that, number one, I have not been on a showing with anybody who I think would be well known. I think that, obviously everybody is self-important, some more than others. But I think I have to start working with bigger clients. I need some friends like yours, Richard, to really recommend me to these people. But, so wait, what property did they end up buying?
Things happened in their lives that precluded him from buying a ranch, is my understanding. So he didn't buy anything.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
But he was certainly qualified to buy it.
You made it sound earlier like he did end up buying something, because you're like, he didn't buy that particular piece.
Oh, well.
But you still work with him, correct?
No, that was my only encounter with him, because he was technically Dean's client. But I do know that he did not buy anything. And I didn't mean to imply that he had, but there were some other things that happened that kept him from doing it.
Yeah. Do you think, so how long have you been, you said 22 years you've been
22,
an agent? So whenever you're first, talking with like a prospect, how do you know that they're qualified?
That's a very difficult thing to do.
It is. And I told this to Lauren Smith, who I mentioned earlier.
Sure.
She and I said I think it's an art. We were talking about when to know when to walk away from a deal.
Sure.
That's hard to do because you always think that there's money left on the table. And you don't want to cut somebody out before it's too soon, because what if that would have been the deal that would close? So I really think that's an art. I personally don't think I have that down yet. I will cut the cord quickly, one false move, and I'm like, this is a red flag. And
right.
I'm not going any further.
Right.
But I think that really, other than being handed a bank statement or, financials, I mean, how do you know?
It's very, very difficult. And fortunately, though, now with technology, it's a lot easier today than it was when I first started.
Okay.
I have a short story about that. When we had a very large listing, and this fellow called. His name is now persona non grata in our office, so you can't even mention his name. But he called and gave us this story about having property in South Florida at an intersection of the interstate and another major road that he was selling to the state. And according to him, it was going to be millions of dollars. And back then, we couldn't just jump on the internet and figure out, all right, does he own this? It was really a lot more difficult to find things out.
Well, I would think you'd have to call like the property appraiser and get them to verify and have the legal description and
Sure.
the name and everything. So.
Well, and that was part of the problem.
Not to be rude, but was there fax at that time? Okay, I was just asking.
For the people who are watching this podcast, this is my "you're gonna die" look. So,
Make a mental note of that. We can go over that after this is done.
yeah, although I do think the faxes back then were still thermal paper. So
I'm not far. I don't think I'm that far off.
Okay.
I don't think I'm that far off.
yeah,
They could hear the look through the.
I'm
through
sure.
the-
Yeah. So there may have been, but anyway, we did our best to vet this guy, and Dean has innumerable contacts at the state.
Okay.
And so he called somebody, and we did find out that there was a relationship. So the best lies have partial truth.
Sure.
Yeah, and so he developed his credibility, and so we showed him this one parcel. He actually contracted it, but turns out the piece of property that he had was minuscule, and I don't even think it was over $100,000 in value. It was a very tiny thing, but he used that to get. And I don't know why people do this, but there have been plenty of crazy people through our career, and it's just difficult to know. I mean,
Okay, this happened on the last pod, and this is the thing. We just bought this new building, and literally none of us are selling properties, so sometimes the lights go out, the electricity goes off, the AC doesn't work anymore. We're back.
Okay.
This is the other thing, Richard. This podcast is hinging on you kind of like going viral and bringing in a lot of money so we can keep the lights on here.
awesome.
We got to keep the lights on and the doorbells ringing, Richard.
Now I don't feel any pressure.
Yeah.
They're motion censored, so she just wants to see me dance.
I
have
see.
to get up, wave my arms.
Yeah, there
shake
needs to be a
around.
timer. Okay,
Yeah,
stand
yeah.
up now.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. It's supposed to be 30 minutes, but
Right.
we've only been recording for 28.
We've only been recording for 28, but I will tell you, so I said Chad, he was like my emotional support animal, but he also is in here strictly to keep the lights on.
Very good.
to move an arm around every 30 minutes.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay, so you don't know why people would, you were saying you don't know why people do this, why they would like lie.
Yeah.
Because I'm wondering that too, like why would you want to go through that? It's a lot of work.
I've got dozens of examples of this, but my most recent example was another. It was 109 acres up in North Lakeland. Had another nice house on it, and beautiful property. And through another realtor, she brings this prospective buyer out. She shows up in a Maserati.
I think the realtor shows up in a Maserati?
No, the prospective buyer shows up in a Maserati. So that gives the
illusion, for
of,
sure.
of having money. And so while we were showing, and the prospective buyer and her boyfriend were walking around the house, I asked her, I said, how do you know these people? And she goes, they just called me off of Zillow. I'm like, ugh, because Zillow is a very bad thing. I hate Zillow. But
we'll cut that as well, so that way we don't all die in our sleeps tonight.
yeah. So
I just wanted to know how the Maserati handles the bull holes.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. I should have 1 + 1. Yeah, okay. So
Can I tell you a secret?
sure.
I guess it won't be a secret for long, but 1 + 1 - 1 is still 1.
Yeah.
Just so you know.
Okay.
That was a
Well,
sidebar.
are we going back to the 1984 story,
No.
the book? Okay.
Also, Chad, you were supposed to remind me to stop clicking my tongue.
Oh. Okay, so I'm going back to my story. So she shows up in this Maserati, naturally lends itself to credibility.
Yeah.
And looks around and, I'm going to
What kind of property was this? How many?
It was 109 acres with a
Okay.
very large house and
Okay.
pool and barn and
Okay.
gorgeous. And so she goes, I'm a cash buyer. We really don't need to, we'll close as soon as paperwork is done. And
I'd have been like, sign on the line. I've
I
got
know,
it done right now.
Right. So the other realtor said, I'll be in touch. So we leave. And are we prepared to leave?
Mm-hmm.
The lady turns around and says, I don't know why she felt compelled to say this at this time, but
You said the lady, are you talking about the agent or the prospect?
No, the prospect, who
Okay.
was the Maserati driver.
Okay.
Because she would not let her boyfriend drive it. But anyway, so we're there, and she turns around and says, I am, just so you know, I'm in charge of facilitating all the kidney transplants in the United States, which I thought, well, that's pretty interesting. She goes, my most famous clients are Kobe Bryant and his daughter. And immediately,
Well,
I think this was a total waste of time. And so I didn't respond. I just, okay, well, we'll talk to you soon. And they left, and I immediately called the other realtor and said, did
wait a second.
Okay.
Wait a second.
Yeah.
Was she saying that she...
This is post-crash. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's the thing.
This
Because
is
Kobe
recent,
and his
yeah.
daughter had already perished in the helicopter crash. So there were no kidneys to transplant.
I am disgusted by that.
Isn't that not crazy? Well,
That's wrong.
her story continues because she's taken advantage of a couple other realtors in town on large acreage tracts like that.
She could be sued. You know
Well,
what? I can't
this
give out
is-
legal advice. I
No,
don't know.
it's even better than that. So she goes and looks at this property, who happens to have been listed on Airbnb. They contract with the Airbnb
Mm-hmm.
for one night. It took them 2 weeks to get them evicted by the sheriff out of that house. Then we find out that just before she came out to ours, she had been released from probation for fraud.
Here's where I'm having a problem. I work, I don't want to say hard. I work. I cannot afford a Maserati. What is that? How are people who are clearly unhinged and wrong in so many ways rolling up in a Maserati? Tell me.
I don't know how it happens. I had another client who had contracted a property, who just before the deposit was due lets us know that all his funds are tied up in foreign currency.
Okay.
And the U.S. Treasury has shut him
Seized
down,
them.
has seized it, which that was completely a lie as well.
Yeah. I do not understand how you're going to go through, literally like paperwork, due diligence. You're wasting other people's time,
An
which they don't
incredible
care
amount.
about that.
That's right.
I wouldn't put in the work for myself. If I'm like a fraud, and I'm trying to lie my way through something, I'm going to do an easy. I'm going to make it as easy as I can for myself. I'm not going to go through all this time and effort and emails and work and, contracting with people, appointments. I'm not doing it. I just think it is so bizarre. The Maserati story is pretty bizarre.
Yeah, it's all crazy. And this goes to your question, how do you vet people?
Yeah.
And it's so very difficult
Yeah.
because in each case, they had a level of credibility. And so we were, you just have to do the best you can and do all you can do. And
Well, and I think it also is, another reason why brokers want to control both sides of the deal is because I can't always rely on a co-broker or somebody bringing in a prospect to have the full picture, because my due diligence is different than yours, is different than, anybody else. But if I was the other agent in the Maserati story and somebody called me and I met them, because you want to chase every lead, you just do. But I met them and they like pull up in a Maserati. I'm thinking, I've hit the jackpot. Like, this is legit. I'm going to be able to like close a deal with this person because they seem okay. But then I think it goes back to, you have to dig deeper than just seeing what somebody's rented or I guess stolen Maserati.
Right.
So you just never know. But I think that's where, like your experience, if I saw, if I, oh my God, are we keeping you from something, Richard?
No, I just got a text on my phone, on my watch, and I wasn't sure what it was. So anyway.
Do you need to answer that?
No.
Okay. The next time or the first time, if I have somebody come to a listing in a Maserati, I'm going to be highly suspicious of that person.
Absolutely.
I am going to assume that person is a liar. Okay, interesting.
Well, one other interesting note about the house with the Maserati.
Yeah.
Through another realtor who vetted, who said, oh yeah, these are the real folks.
Okay.
Showed up, and it was a younger couple, and she purported to be a professional barrel racer and a surgeon. And she was transferring here from someplace out of state to take up a position at Tampa General.
Okay.
So this other realtor
To be a kidney doctor, maybe?
Oh, that's good, Chad. Good. I didn't even think about that. But yeah, no. Anyway, there was absolutely nothing true about her story at all. Again, oh yeah, we're going to pay cash and we're going to close quick. So it's just, and you would never have imagined that any of these people were just off the deep end. So.
Did you ever watch Seinfeld?
I love Seinfeld.
Do you remember when George said that he was a vet and the whale had a golf ball stuck? And he's like, his girlfriend's like, he's a vet. That's what we have to start doing to people. It's like, oh, you're a surgeon? Wow, my cousin, da-da-da-da-da, and ask them how they would perform the surgery. Right. We've got to start asking the deep dive questions of these prospects.
Well, the people that are listening to this podcast and have heard my stories now are probably going to say, this guy is a weird magnet.
They're going to be like, how has he ever sold one piece of
Exactly. I mean, Bubba hasn't got it all going on.
I guess for every weird one that you have, you'll have a legit one, or at least two or three more legit.
Yeah, several.
Good thing you didn't tell the chicken wing story, because then they would really know.
Yes, that's my, you can take the boy out of Polk County, but you can't take the Polk County out of the boy story.
When we ask people to come on the podcast, I'm not that cool. I guess I can't call it the pod yet. Thank you, Chad. We asked them, we're like, yeah, we want some funny stories. We want some life experience. And so Richard was telling us a story about a hot dog and a chicken wing.
Hot dogs and chicken wings, yes.
And how he was
Chili. The Daytona 500.
Yes.
Would you like me to tell the story?
Go for it, Richard.
What are you laughing at, Chad?
You tell the story, and then I'll tell you Chad and I'll recap mine and Chad's reactions. Go ahead, Richard. The mic's yours.
Okay, so I was invited by a member of the Florida Realtors leadership to go to the Daytona 500, and this was back when they still had the large the back straightaway had a large I don't know, what do you call it, Chad? The condo thing, whatever, where you could.
I just wish I had a camera here that I could zoom in on Chad and Michael, because Chad's face is bright red.
I know.
Michael is trying to laugh the quietest he's ever laughed in his life, because he does not want to be on mic or camera.
Right.
The press boxes.
Well, yeah, it's like press boxes, but it's where, they're the.
Is it like VIP?
The luxury boxes,
okay.
yes. And so each one of them was about the width of this room and had tables set up in a stadium seating kind of thing, and each chair had its own little table. Well, when you're in those kind of things, they just bring you all kind of food. breakfast, lunch, and then in the afternoon they bring you a snack. When you're in this environment and it's your first trip to the big town, you feel obligated to eat everything. So in the afternoon, I went to the buffet, and they had chicken wings and hot dogs and chili. And so I got a few chicken wings and a hot dog.
I love that you said when you're in the big time, and then it's like, we had hot dog and chili.
Yeah, I know, yeah, right. There's a little disconnection there. But, so they had the chili, and on top of the chili, they had melted cheese. And so I was the first one to go in and get
your food.
A plate, right?
Yeah.
And so when I put the heavy metal spoon in the cheese, just getting a tiny bit of cheese, that entire layer of cheese came off on the spoon. So I banged it on the metal thing, thinking, okay, this is going to come off. It did not. So then I hit it one time on my plate. Naturally, it all came off on my plate. So I took my plate back to the seat, and the guy who flew me over in his private plane to the FBO, where all those private planes come in, and we were next to the Home Depot people. All these people with serious money, and all the boxes in that whole building, all the walls were glass, so you could see into the next box, 2 or 3 down. And so I took my plate back to the seat, and I ate my chicken wings, had my bones all piled up on the plate, and again, another disconnect. They had plastic forks and spoons and knives.
Okay.
And so I decided I would try. Is that a commentary on my long story?
That was a mistake. Chad did not mean to hit that button.
Oh, I see. Okay, whatever. Well, I'm gonna finish this story, hell or high water. So, so I take my plastic fork and knife and try to cut the cheese, and
I clicked the button too soon.
The fork broke, and what I didn't know was I had the plate only partially on my little table. So when it broke, I hit the side of it, the plate goes flying into the air, all my chicken bones go and wind up in the lap of the guy who brought me. And I am scarlet red at that point, and I look to both sides, and in both rooms are people looking at me, having witnessed this, with their mouths hanging open like, what did I just see? So long story short is, you can take the guy out of Polk County, but you can't take the Polk County out of the boy.
I would say not. That does sound like something that somebody from Auburndale would do, not necessarily somebody from Lakeland.
I am a Lakeland person, but
I know. I think you might have been indoctrinated in the Dale. So cool story. But when you first told it, Chad and I are trying to record the opening, or like the intro, and I would just say that we were both quite underwhelmed.
Because of my story?
Yes. And we both, I keep hitting this mic today for some reason, but we both,
well, we thought you were coming in with a story about real estate, and we look at each other and we're like, all right.
I think Chad literally was like,
story to say you spilt chicken wings and hot dogs on a rich guy, and we're like, okay.
Chad was like, please close the door behind you and get out.
It was real estate related because it was the Florida Realtors box, so that's the connection.
It was related, but
yes.
I think there was a reason that I asked you for a different story.
Oh, okay. Well, I am well acquainted with Rabbit Trails R Us. So,
Richard, but you are one of my favorite people in the office to talk to, because you truly, you've got the best stories, and you have the funniest stories when you go off on Rabbit Trails, because it's like you think of another story that you have, and they are very funny. Maybe not the chicken wing one, but others are just a delight.
Well, I can tell you I've gotten universal appreciation for my chicken wing story, so you all are the exception.
Everybody will love it. Chad and I are the exception.
Well, we were just trying to figure out how it was going to be applicable to the podcast, furthering the message.
Yeah.
We are experts, and in our expert opinion,
Rich.
don't spill chicken wings and hot dogs
on the person who
yeah.
flew you somewhere.
Yeah,
Always-
private to the big time, as
To
you
the
said.
Daytona
Yeah.
500, which is the big time for Richard.
Yeah. Well,
I've
always,
been to the Daytona 500. It's a lovely time.
it's an awesome time.
It's a lovely time.
Well, the moral of the story is always have your metal fork and knife with you. That way it doesn't break and you don't flip the chicken wings everywhere.
That one deserves another.
I don't even know what to do with that or where to go.
And that's a wrap.
I guess I'll just go to my cards now and
Okay.
figure out what I'm doing. Thanks, Richard.
It has been my pleasure.
Do you have any other stories you want to tell before we...
Other
before we
stories? So that you can place them in place of my chicken wing story?
We'll patch them in.
Yeah. Patch 'em in.
I'm just trying to think, is there anything? Oh,
You did have you were not involved in a murder.
yeah, I don't want to go
What?
with that. I don't want to go to that one.
What?
Richard did not murder anybody.
No, I did
Richard
not.
did not murder anybody.
However, I do have a story where me and a client could have pressed charges for false imprisonment, and
Okay.
but my wife instructed me not to tell that story. So
Yet you still bring it up and leave us on a cliffhanger.
This
We're
is
here
for-
with false imprisonment and involved in murder. And we're just going to be like, all right, guys, we'll see you next week.
Richard is like leaving it
No.
purposely so he's
this is
invited
for
back.
next time
Part
on
two.
our
Yes.
in our expert opinion.
Okay. Richard, if you think of any more funny stories or like kind of like the Maserati story.
Well, the day is young.
I know. Let us know because
Okay.
we'd love to hear it. But thanks for coming on the podcast, Richard.
My pleasure. There's nothing I love more than to give my opinion.
Or for your name and face to be out there.
That's true.
Okay, well, again, I said this the last time, but I'm sure that Jennifer and I are the only ones going to be listening to this podcast. So thanks, me and Jennifer. This is not the right card. These are the right cards because she gives me these. Please be sure to subscribe to the podcast, share the podcast. I have rate and review on here. I think this one would be... If you had to rate it, what would you rate it? Out of like a 1 to 5, 5 being best, 1 being awful.
Well, if you take me out of the picture, then it's, a different score. If it's me in the picture, it's top of the charts.
So thank you. I guess you'd hate me. Okay, thank you for that, Richard.
What? My middle name is Clueless, so.
You should play it right now. You can find us at svnsaunders.com/podcast on Apple or Google Podcast or anywhere you get your podcast. I'd like to apologize to Michael and Chad for me moving around and making the volume really hard this time. So
and
thanks,
not
guys.
knowing what Michael does at the
I'm
office.
sorry, Michael.
He did this whole thing. I sat back here. I clicked 2 buttons the whole time.
And he danced.
I danced, turned the lights on. All right, guys. Till next time.
Thank you.